Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Another exciting show, another exciting guest. Today, we're going to get into the mind of Bobbie Vasquez. And let me tell you where we're going with this show today. Here's a beautiful young lady that is a commanding officer. But let's go a little bit deeper than this. Let's take a journey on how the suit helped to bring out a side of her that was hidden behind the suit. Imagine, if you will, having to command individuals in combat situations, mechanical, every aspect of military lifestyle. You've been told to do this, but when that suit comes off, you got to deal with your own shortcomings and, more importantly, other people's stuff that amplify those shortcomings. Here to tell her story all the way from beautiful Hawaii, the one, the only, Bobbie. What's up, baby girl?
Good morning, or good afternoon. Oh, no, actually, it's still morning. Good morning.
Um, we talked extensively, and first of all, thank you so much for protecting my peace on American soil and protecting other Americans with your years of service. I believe it's what, over 23 years?
23 years and some change. And I do want to just make one correction. I'm not a commanding officer. I'm just I was a battalion sergeant major, and now I'm currently just a operations sergeant major.
Take me down there. What's the difference? What's the difference between that? What's your role? Tell the viewers a bit about who you are.
So my role as a battalion operations sergeant major is basically I work for a brigade level element, which is one step up from where I came when I was in Savannah, Georgia, 8 months ago. I was a battalion command sergeant major that I was responsible for 400 to 500 soldiers. Um, Both enlisted officers and warrant officers. And I relinquished that responsibility back in September. And then I moved here to Hawaii, where my job here is basically I do all of the training, planning, logistical aspects of a day-to-day operations for a brigade size element.
Now, was military your first choice coming out of school, high school? How did military even come up on your radar?
Um, I was 17 years old when I joined the Army back in 2000. I joined on the delayed entry program. So what that means is like you join while you're still in high school, you finish, you graduate, and then immediately after graduation, you would depart to basic training. So I had 13 days in between the day I graduated to the day I shipped off to basic training. So obviously, being 17 years old, I couldn't join the Army on my own. I actually needed my mother's signature to help me enlist in the Army. But there were some life events that occurred when I was a senior in high school that really propelled me to make the decision to do something that was bigger than myself. Um, I grew up in a small town right outside of Corpus Christi, Texas, and at that time there was just one red light in the city, and I felt that I was gonna not go anywhere if I were to stay there. So I chose to serve my country, and I basically just showed up at a Army recruiter's office and did some wheeling and dealing and said, I'll sign your paper if you get me Hawaii, a bonus, and I was like, I don't care what I do. And the job I chose at that time was a helicopter engine mechanic, or then it was a 68 Bravo, which mechanics, I had no idea what I was going to do. I showed up to advanced individual training, and I don't even think I knew what a hammer was at the time. But I mean, that's where I'm at now. So 23 years later, I did have a small break in service after my first enlistment here in Hawaii, which was actually my first duty station, and now it's actually going to be my last. So I am going to retire from here.
What was what was the sales pitch? You know, you have a sister, right? So
Hmm.
what was the sales pitch outside of Corp? And I know about Corpus Christi, Texas. I had a buddy John that went to college there, and I know it's a small town, but did you always have a bigger mindset than the town that you was growing in? And more importantly, how did your family deal with it, especially your sister and your mom and dad? That all of a sudden their daughter comes to them and say, I want to go to the military.
I think at the time I was being a very rebellious teenager, and uh, I think the mindset I had was if I didn't make the decision to leave the town I was in because all I was doing was getting in trouble. If I didn't leave, I would continue down a dark path, and I didn't want to continue down that dark path. So I chose to leave what I was comfortable with to go do something that I didn't know if I was going to succeed or fail. And my mom at the time was very supportive. So I grew up in a broken home, and I didn't see and or talk to my dad very much growing up. Um, when I graduated high school, at graduation, my dad actually, um, that's when he found out that I had joined the Army. So my dad is a Marine Corps vet, and served in Vietnam. And it was actually kind of funny. He was like, "Well, we're going to have to talk about this." And at the time, the deal was already done. I had already enlisted, and I was already shipping off to basic training in a couple weeks. So there was really no talking to be had. Uh, and I will say at the time that I didn't know then what I know now, which was that was by far one of the best decisions that I have made in my life, was to join the Army. I didn't have a sense of purpose. Um, Growing up, I didn't have great grades then, so I didn't have a an aspect on life or a look an outlook on life that I knew what I wanted to do. So I figured, hey, let me go do this. I'll make some money. I'll at least be able to take care of myself, and do those things, and I'll be self sufficient. And that's kind of where the decision was. My sister supported it. My sister was in college when I left for basic training, and then my mom stayed in Ingleside for some years after that before she ended up moving back to Oklahoma.
Let me go back a little bit because I'm gonna take the viewers from past to mid structure to where we're at now. So let me go back a little bit. You mentioned a broken home. Elaborate broken home. That's the first question. The second question is your father shows up in the picture after. What did he really share with you on graduation day, or did you really could care less? Because was he or was he not a part of your life growing up? And then third question, I know this is a lot of questions, but they're on my mind now. The third question is so the viewers understand that the Army was a good choice for you at that time. What was the choices that you was making that could have derailed you?
So, when talking about a broken home, my mom growing up, I had a, I would, I would say there was a lot of men in my mom's life. I had one stepfather that was pretty much there from when I was, you know, 3 years old to when I was like 16 years old. And his name was Roy. Uh, I would say a great stepdad, um, in the grand scheme of things. And then when my mom and him split up, um, it was basically just my mom trying to make ends meet. And at that time, me and my sister were very involved in sports. We were very involved in lots of activities after school, that required money to do things. My mom never quit in terms of making sure that we had everything that we needed to have. She, worked 2 to 3 jobs sometimes to make sure that, we got senior pictures, we got, shoes for cross country or track, or, if we had to buy gear or whatever the case. My mom was very good at that moment in her life to make sure that she provided for us. And when my dad kind of resurfaced back when I graduated in 2000, um, at that point, my relationship with my father was not great. I had my mom never outright came in and told us that, like, this is why me and your father, are no longer. So we grew up thinking that my dad didn't love us. Um, and that's the God's honest truth, that, like, and what that could do to two little girls at that fact, it makes you feel like you're not wanted. Um, and when I had made the decision to join the army, and to get to your question, like, what was the kind of like life I was living? I was just making lots of bad decisions. I was skipping school. I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. I was staying late. I was disappearing on my mom. I was stressing her out. Um, Whereas if you compare me and my sister was like, always went to school. She was salutatorian of her class. She was like the smart one, whereas like Deidre had the smarts, Bobbie had the street smarts. Um, and I the closer I got to graduation, I had the notion that if I kept going down the road I was going, I wasn't going to be alive for much longer, because I was making that bad of decisions. I was drinking, and I was only like 16, 17 years old. And I was using that as an outlet, um, to try to get through life. And it wasn't the right answer. So deciding to join the army, I felt if I had a structure and a system that could, move me or align me in a way that would be more beneficial to how I holistically come out whole, then I was going to take it. And the opportunity presented itself. The recruiters come to your high school and they give briefs and they do that, and it was just a light bulb that switched. And I will tell you, my defining moment was, I actually uh, it was like senior skip day, and I went to the beach with a group of friends, and I drank a lot of alcohol, and my friends ended up ditching me on the beach, and I ended up getting alcohol poisoning pretty bad. Some tourists came and found me, called an ambulance, and I got taken to the hospital, and I actually died on the table. um, and they pumped my stomach like 2 to 3 times. The whites of my eyes were bloodshot red, and it was that moment when I came out of it, that I said I needed to change my life. And my mom and my stepdad, which was her soon to be ex-husband, or her next husband, his name was Mark. I actually asked for him. And in that moment, as soon as I got released from the hospital, what they did was they took me right back to the beach, uh, where they found me. And I had like a coming to Jesus moment. It was either going to be continue to go down that path, or I needed to do something. And 7 days later, I enlisted in the army.
My last question. Your dad shows up and he wants to give you a word of advice. Because I would assume your dad, what war was he in?
Vietnam.
I'm pretty sure he may have, and I don't know, may have suffered from post traumatic stress disorder his own self. I'm just assuming.
Hmm. Hmm.
Am I correct on this?
Yeah. Yes, my dad has a slew of things that he's has continuously worked on, with the veterans, with the VA. My dad, he's 81 years old now, and or 80. He's 80, 81. I think he's turning 81 this December. Um, the advice that he gave me, or that we talked about, was just, because I'm his youngest, out of all the children he has. And it was kind of like that, like, are you sure you're making the right decision, knowing that what he went through, obviously there's a huge difference between the Vietnam War, and at that time when I enlisted, it was right before 9/11. So even then, I didn't necessarily know what I was getting myself into. Um, but he just said, I think our conversation back then was, I already made my decision. You're not going to change it. There's like nothing you could say that could potentially scare me from doing what I'm about to do. And that was it. We just kind of, we, parted ways at that point. And I think at that moment, it would be another 16 years before I actually reconnected with my father.
Let's go here. You go into the military, and it's different than being in corporate crispy Texas. How do you adjust? Because the reason I'm saying this is because I'm gonna take the viewers down that transformation. You didn't have the beast mindset when you went in there. That was more of let a trial and error. Let me see if this can make an impact in my life. So when you get in there, what was the hardest things for you to come to grips with once you got into the military?
So for me, I think, and really this is for any soldier that is transforming from, civilian to soldier. Um, you come with your own set of values, morals, and beliefs, right? And in basic training, they ingrain and they drill in your head the 7 Army values. And what it's like to, never leave a fallen comrade, or warrior's ethos, and all of those things. um the difference, I think, between, Corpus Christi and not having, and I was, being in the Army 23 years, I have what I would call, sisters and brothers in arms, people that I would definitely, lay my life on the line for, or I would take a bullet for. And that's any veteran, that is put themselves in harm's way. Um, what I learned in that, and back then basic training was 10 weeks long. I will say I was very homesick during that time. I definitely miss my mom. I definitely, even though at the time I joined the Army, I was, I would call myself a bad child, but I realized kind of what I had taken for granted. And as I started adopting the Army's values as my own, um, I was able to see from an outside lens basically what I had been doing to my mom, um, and how selfish I was in the way I was starting to, live through my life, and not taking other people's like feelings and all of those things into consideration. Not that I wasn't a kind person, but I don't think then, I think I was more in performance mode for people that I was hanging around, versus actually being, my authentic being.
You go into the military with athletic prowess, which means you're a good athlete. When you are an athlete, you do have a chip on your shoulder. We do like the challenge, and I believe the Army was another level of challenge. So, what was that hurdle for you to get over outside of being homesick? And I remember my brother when he went to the Marines. I think they give you guys a phone call, and he called me on the phone and was like, "Homesick, you want to come?" I said, "Dude, you signed a letter. You can't you can't come home. You know what I mean? So you got to stay there and do the time." So, but he eventually. I remember when he came home after his tour of duty in Desert Storm. I was like so proud because he was a sergeant. And I was like, "Dude, you're only like 18 years old or 19 years old. Those dudes are older than you." And he said, "That's work." So I saw him go in, and I seen how he came out in the time that he served his country. So you going in with somewhat of an athlete behind you. What was your main goal? Was it to prove, what were you trying to prove once you got there? Because now you got to start developing a sense of identity, not outside the military, but within the military. How does that change for you now?
So I would say coming into the Army, having an athletic background, I I wasn't as far behind as some of the other individuals that, were not athletic or, didn't, do, basically just, I think PE was like what it was called in school at the time. It might still be called PE. I have no idea. But um, because I was able to do that, I actually found that I was excelling um, above my peers in basic training. And what that ended up doing, so in basic training, I came in as an E1, which is a private, and at my basic training graduation, I actually got promoted to private PV2, um, which is just a private, but with one step up. And that was based off of my athleticism and how I was excelling in the Army physical fitness test. I also took on a bunch of leadership roles. I was a platoon sergeant. I helped the drill sergeants outside of time, like creating new packets for the next cycle. And I was just taking on a lot of things that one kept me busy and kept my mind off of being homesick. But I think, and especially when I graduated, my mom came to my graduation at Fort Jackson. It's where I attended basic training. Um, and seeing her for the first time after 10 weeks, me getting promoted, and then she drove me from basic training to where I was going to school up in Fort Eustis, Virginia, near Newport News. And the the like look on her face, and really it was for myself. I did it for myself because I was failing so bad at home that I just wanted to succeed for once at something. And I proved to myself that, and that's probably when it started, that when you really put your mind to something, it doesn't matter what curveballs, it was, learning how to shoot a weapon, doing the obstacle course, doing long ruck marches, all of those things. When you put your mind to something, and you pour into it everything that your being has, you will succeed. And sometimes you won't, sometimes you'll fail, and that's okay. But you'll never know if you don't try. So it was like going into it with that mentality, like if I don't try, I'll never know if I'm going to be able to succeed. And I did. And then the look on my mom's face, and to hear her say for the first time in a really long time that she was proud of me, um, was probably what I took away the most at that moment in time.
You wind up losing your mother. So I'm going to go here real quick with this. You had enough time with her driving you to your next um, destination after graduation. What do you remember about that talk outside of her saying that she was proud of you? What do you remember to this day that if that opportunity hadn't came, had you not put that in there, do you think it would have broke her heart? Because deep down inside, parents don't always tell their children that they're proud of them. They like to like what I call lead by example, and they will tell other people about your accolades, instead of telling you. So you go on a from graduation. Now your mom is taking you. Now you have to have a heart to heart talk with your mom. What are some of the things that you remember, and you're now a mother yourself, that you bring back into you your livelihood as a mother?
I will say one of the things that actually sticks out, and I do still remember this to this day. So it's a 7-hour drive from Columbia, South Carolina to Fort Eustis, Virginia. And we left the day of basic training graduation. We drove uh, through the evening, and we got to a hotel where we stayed at. And I was able to like kind of reshuffle some things. I went to maybe Walmart at the time or a grocery store, and I picked up some laundry detergent and some other things that I would need, and I kind of you know got myself situated a little bit better. I do remember eating a bunch of Reese's Pieces with my mother, um, or Reese's Peanut Butter Cups with my mother in the hotel room. But I remember the next day when she had to take me to drop me off, I did not want to go. Um, in fact, we got on to Fort Eustis. We drove to where she needed to drop me off. I actually saw some of the people who that I graduated basic training with that rode the bus from South Carolina to Fort Eustis getting smoked. Um, and I remember telling my mom, keep driving. And we circled around, and then we went, I want to say we went to like the PX or something. And I was afraid of what was going to come next. And my mom, I remember her saying like, look at what you've already accomplished, you know? And she's like, what's just one more day? Like one more day. Like you've already, you graduated from basic training, and now you're here. Now, granted, for being a helicopter, engine repair, the schooling is quite long. It's like 6 months and like 2 weeks. So it wasn't like I was just going to be there for a couple of weeks. That was like a whole nother half a year of schooling for me to be able to learn my military occupational specialty. Um, but I remember her uh, telling me that I could do it, and her really putting the seed in my brain that kind of gave me that extra, all right, Bobbie, like quit being scared. You can do it. And I remember that to that day. And she took me back. I want to say we probably stayed away for like 2 or 3 hours. Like I ended up going back when it was like dark outside. So by the time I got there, I will say that I didn't get smoked. And because it was so late when I reported, they basically just did a shakedown of my stuff, make sure I didn't have any contraband, assign me a room, and then they put me to bed. So I kind of escaped the onslaught of the drill sergeant shark attack back then, um, thanks to my mom, or at least my mom, when I said like I don't want to go yet. Like I'm enjoying our time together, and I've obviously missed you for the last 10 weeks, and I don't want to leave yet. Um, but yeah.
What about your dad?
So my dad wasn't in the picture at this time. My dad didn't come in back into the picture until I when I was at the 2022, when I was at the Sergeant Major Academy. And he reached out my birthday. He lived in Arlington, Texas. The Sergeant Major Academy is based out of El Paso, Texas. He just reached out and said, "Hey, your birthday's coming up. Like, would it be okay if I came to El Paso to visit you for your birthday?" Um, and I agreed. I was like, I mean, I didn't have anybody in El Paso at that time. It was just me and my kids. And yeah, so I agreed, and he came to visit me in El Paso, and then that's really when the relationship with me and my father uh, did a basically a 180 degrees, and I realized by asking some hard questions, that visit, the what I said before at the beginning of the interview, which was like we grew up thinking my dad didn't love us anymore, and that wasn't necessarily the case. There was some things that happened between him and my mom that we weren't privy to, which really changed the trajectory of how I saw my dad and saw my father. um, and I realized that I had to kind of let it go, and I had to allow him back into my life. I mean, I didn't have to, but I wanted that relationship with my father. Um, and I mean, I still have I have a really great relationship with my father now, and we talk almost every evening. And it's good, especially now that like my mom passed. And I don't. There's some regret there in the very end of mine and my mother's relationship, that I don't want to do that same thing with my father. So,
Mhm.
making sure that I make the effort and the time to focus on my family is super important to me.
You talk about your father. We're going to go briefly here. You don't have to get deep, but being astray for so long and you've achieved what you've achieved and still achieving, like, how difficult was that? And what were some of the things that you asked him that really plagued you the most? That now that you look at it, had you not asked those questions, that second particular question, don't tell them where your mindset would be right now.
I think, if I didn't take the time to just, ask, and it was a simple question. It wasn't nothing that was like, off the wall. It was just literally like, what happened between you and mom? And, he answered, you know, honestly, and he answered, being very transparent. And, you know, it's the relationship between me and my dad is so weird because we went 16 years without having a conversation, and we meet up in El Paso, and it's like we never skipped a beat. Um, and the conversations were free flowing. They were, they were genuine. They were, we didn't have to really force the conversation. It just naturally came. And I think if I didn't have those answers, and then, you know, me being me, he tells me one thing, and then I immediately call my mom to like verify it, because not that I don't trust my father or didn't trust my father at the time, but like my mom has led us to believe one thing because she never did a course correction. And then my dad is telling me something completely different, that it wasn't he didn't love us. It was, my mom had some infidelity, and um, rightly so. Like if that would happen to me, I would do the same thing in my life that I have done, right? And knowing those things and seeing my dad um, being vulnerable like that, and then asking my mom, and her reaction was not as genuine as what my dad's reaction was. That was kind of the moment in time where I was just like, I got to give him a chance. I can't put it off any longer. He's 20 years older than my mom, so my mom passed when my or she was 59. That my dad was 79, so there's a huge age difference. So while my mom was very young when she passed, my dad has lived a long fulfilling life, and is still out there kicking it, and doing all the things that like most 80-year-olds can't do. And I think a lot of that has to just be his service to the Marine Corps, and he just pushes through, he just keeps going. So oddly enough, I would tell you I'm very much like my father, more like my father than I was like my mother. I get a lot of things from my mom, being, determined, never giving up, never doing those things. But a lot of my spunk comes from my dad.
Let's go here. I'm going down the road of transformation with the absence of a male role model, so to speak. You get Now you get into maturity where you get married. How does military marriage in the persona of being promoted to all these different things, how does that work in the military for you? Because what I'm going here is you really didn't have that stability self, and then your mom came in later, or should we say self identity, self worth. How does the lack of self worth and then going into a marriage deal with, how do you craft that when you don't really know, the self worth category, because your mom is doing this, your dad shows up years later, but you're still a woman with, needs, a relationship, you want a family, but you don't have that, you haven't built that inner structure on that end. You're building it with the military. How did that work out for you?
Not well. Uh, I for a long time, and I think it is, when for my mom, as I grew up, watching things that she tolerated when it came to men. I wouldn't say it was like a revolving door of men, but I definitely went through several men that I would call a stepdad of sort. And because that was the norm, it wasn't necessarily something that I did. I mean, I got married very early in life, had children very early in life. Actually here in Hawaii, my first duty station, uh, it was basically the first man I came into contact with, and we were both young and we got pregnant right away. And not having that knowledge of really how the marriage aspect is supposed to work, um, I failed at a lot of things in terms of marriage, not just one marriage, but my second marriage also. Um, because as I was successful in the army, I wasn't doing necessarily I wouldn't say wifely duties or like in a partnership like that. Uh, there were things that I was just overlooking and also like my mom tolerating, because that's growing up what I had seen as being the normal. Um, and I think it set me back 20 something years actually, of a life that I lived where I had no idea who I was. Um, and that's a hard pill to swallow, because while I was successful on in one aspect of my life, in the other aspect, I couldn't get it right.
Let me ask this question. I want to word it correctly. What was the norm for you based on what you saw with your mom? And you mentioned you accepted. What were you accepting when you transitioned from, okay, I did my 9 to 5, now I got to go home? What were you tolerating, and what did you think was the norm, is what I'm saying, as it dealt with relationship, your marriage, your children?
Um, what I accepted as the norm um, wasn't really a so it was like going to work every day 9 to 5, that was it. But like coming home, there was no like familial bond that really, I would say, like kept the peace. Um, so there was like no planning, no effort, because I had exhausted all that at work. It was very hard to come home, and especially in my second marriage. Um, I had my children were young when me and him got together, and I took a lot of the brunt in terms of making sure my kids uh, were bathed, fed, put to bed, and doing all of them. By the time I got done with that, I just had nothing left, and I think accepting the norm was just, I'm gonna go to work, come home, take care of the kids. Anything outside of that, I was just completely blind to. Um, because it wasn't like I didn't see my mom and a man like actually answer to each other, or have deep conversations or work through problems, or in that. So I had no idea how to do that uh, in my first marriage or even in my second marriage. It was just kind of like, a problem comes up, and then it festers, and then you just never deal with it, and then over the years those problems start compounding, and then it becomes one thing after another. And in my second marriage, the infidelity there just got so not consuming is not the right word, but it got so out of hand that he did it once, he did it twice, he did it multiple times, and I was just accepting it like that was okay. And it wasn't, but because I was so focused on one, a lot of that stuff was happening in the background, and I I didn't really, not that I didn't care, but marriage to me meant one thing, and I think marriage to him meant something completely different, where I was gonna just make it work no matter what. And at that time, when you talk about like not knowing your self-worth or those things, I didn't know what I was worth. I didn't know that I didn't have to accept that. I didn't have to just watch somebody go outside our marriage and do those things. I didn't know that, um, you know, confronting people with those things would turn out the way it did. Um, and if I knew now what I didn't know then, I think having some of those hard conversations or doing those things, I could have potentially changed the trajectory of even my first marriage, my second marriage, and then any relationship that I've had thus far after that.
It sounds like the loop theory. So my question here is, how do you, two-part question, how long did you stay in this loop? And what I mean by the loop is this dysfunction, this defragmentation of relationships. And more importantly, how easy was it for you to put on the costume, the military costume, and go out and lead men and women and basically departmentalize what's going on? I can't even imagine how you can be that functional and not and hide it from your peers.
So, to answer the first question, I was stuck in that cyclical loop. Um, and I feel like, and just until recently, like I was still stuck in that cyclical loop for 20 plus years of my life. And, when you bring up compartmentalization, um, I got really good at it. Too good, actually. I knew how to put on the uniform, tighten my boots, fix my face, go about my day like nothing on the inside or nothing at home was like falling apart. What people saw was, they saw my rank. They saw that I could, carry myself with like, posture. They saw my composure. And they saw the leader I was, but what they didn't see was the human being and the woman I was underneath that was silently screaming and trying to figure out, how I was still standing and how I was still functioning. There would be days where, I would either, sit in my car, you take a deep breath and like just tell myself like just don't fall apart. And especially at the end of my second marriage, there were many days like that where I would go into my office, close the door, and have to take a few deep breaths because I was literally, I felt like I was dying inside. But being in charge of, like, at that time I had 465 soldiers that I was responsible for. So I could not allow myself to fall apart. I could not allow them to see that. So I performed. I led. I answered questions. I took care of people. I handled the mission. I never let a mission fail. I made decisions. I made tough decisions for the army that I couldn't even handle making in my own personal life. And at the end of the day, I just carried it. I carried all that weight. Um, and then, somewhere in the middle of all that, I learned how to separate what I felt from what I had to do. And that's exactly what compartmentalization does. It teaches you how to survive in pieces. And whereas, one part of you shows up, one part of you leads, one part of you smiles, one part of you keeps moving, and then there's the part that just that's breaking, and you just tell yourself that you're going to get to it, or it's got to wait till later.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I'm gonna go here. I get what it's like to be Superwoman and Superman. I get that. But let's get real. Everybody, and I'm going to repeat this loud so the people can hear. Everybody has that breaking point. Even me being known as the Beast, I have a breaking point. It's not if it's going to happen. When is it going to happen? When did it happen for you? When did the light bulb of, you know what, I'm good at this, but at the end of the day, this is still taking its toll. And if I'm in charge of 400 people, that's going to affect a judgment sooner or later that could put my people in life in a death situation. When does the light bulb go off and you say, in order for me to be even more effective, I got to stop this loop, get my shit in order before I wind up being in a place I don't want to be in or jeopardize other people's lives and put them in danger?
So I think the start, where the crack, I'll say, started to finally crack open, was at the end of my second marriage. I had a woman ask me, Bobbie, what are you worth? Um, and at the time, I didn't know the answer to that. And the second part of that question she asked me was, how many times are you going to let him do this to you before you realize that you're worth more? Um, and as I sat with that, that was 9 years ago, and I will say that I didn't quite understand where I was going from 9 years ago, 2019, to now, really until my mom passed away. And when my mom passed away, I realized that um, I did all of those things because leadership requires you, often to be, steady, while you're still fighting those battles. But the big thing I realized was that being strong does not necessarily mean that um, you can be strong enough to carry something, but that it's not heavy, and that because or being strong doesn't mean it's enough to carry. It doesn't mean that it's not heavy. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I was making it look easy, and in reality, it's not. And it was costing me a lot. And I was thinking that it was making me powerful, but it wasn't. It was just helping me survive. So until I took the time to really sit with it, um, and realize that if I keep functioning the way I'm functioning, I'm always going to be in survival mode. And at what point do I want to take control of my life back, and push out, a different kind of energy or a different kind of vibration, that would propel me, and attract, the great people that I've met in my life, or where I'm taking my business, or my transition out of the army. If I didn't actually sit back and realize that, like, I don't got to carry that anymore, I got to let it go. And being strong doesn't mean we don't face our problems. um, Being strong means, you face your problem, you sit with it, you work through it, you figure out why you're reacting the way you're reacting, and that it's okay to have emotion. It's okay to take a pause, to take a breath, to work through things, because nobody's perfect. If one person could tell me that they've never had a problem in life, I would be tickled pink, because that's just absolutely not true. But I don't know if I answered your question there or not.
you you did. This is about you, and people need to listen to what you went through. You deserve that. Right. So I'm going to ask this question. I know it's a hypothesis, but how many other women, roughly a percentage, have probably or still is going through what you went through, and how do you give advice to them based on what you went through and change the loop? What are three things that you've done to change the loop that you would recommend for women that are in your situation but is held under the code of silence?
So I would say three things that I have changed. Um, and and a lot of it was like I already had these things. I never used them. I There were tools in my toolbox, but I was just too quiet about things. And when I realized that uh, when you begin healing yourself, um, that the goal is not to keep pretending you're not okay. That it is absolutely okay to not be okay. Um, and I think, some of the goals is just to realize that you have to feel safe enough to be able to tell your truth. And what I've done, and I would say the percentage of women that are going through me, if I could go through, my emails and, my social media messages when I put out advice that, like, if you are walking next to a man who doesn't, is not proud, does not socialize you, is not, does not do these things, guess what? You're already walking alone. And the amount of women that come through, whether it's like social media DM, or they come through my Substack post, or articles, it's astounding the number of people that it resonates with, that they don't realize until they read words and they tell me, like, that is exactly, one, what I'm going through, two, how I feel. But now I know that I'm not alone, and you're not, and that there's a way through it. So I've learned to be vocal, number one, about what I'm feeling, and I'm very transparent. Whether that's, face to face conversation, whether that's, what we're doing right now, whether that's through social media, I'm not afraid to speak up. I've never been afraid to speak up. I didn't get to where I'm at today because I kept my mouth shut, for sure. And when you are falling apart, it is okay to voice those things. The other thing I would say, for me, the second thing I did was I needed to figure out what I was worth. So I had to sit down with myself and start jotting down, this is what I've tolerated, and this is what, I'm not going to tolerate. Like, and so I made some non-negotiables for myself moving forward that I have stuck to. And if a person who comes into my life, whether that's male, female, friend, foe, partner, not partner, family, whatever, if they are not, those three certain things, and for me, that's, being, honest, that's being authentic, and, that's being, transparent, genuine. Like, if they're not those things, then they're not for me. They don't get to have access to me in my life if you can't do that bare minimum. That is my bare minimum. And if you can't meet me there, then that's okay. Um, but and the second part about it is you have to be willing to sit with yourself. And if people aren't willing to do that, it's hard work. It's absolutely hard work. To be able to not just always point the finger, right? Because when you point the finger, there's always three fingers pointing right back at you. So if you continue to blame others for your reactions or your feelings or your thoughts, you're not going to grow. You're just going to stay stuck in that cyclical loop over and over and over.
My last question. Healing is a journey. It's a journey process. You just now coming into what I might call your awakening, your vibrational frequency to that beast mindset. How do you what makes me what will make me listen to you if you're still on a a a a soul journey or a healing journey?
I I think what a lot of people resonate with, and I think, having the experience I have, and I would say a very reputable reputation in the Army, that right there alone has given me, I would say, a lot of credit. Um, that I've gone from, a small town girl to an individual who possesses, the mental capacity to be able to lead large formations of soldiers, while also doing that on the opposite side of that, I tell the other end of I go to the other spectrum. I talk about sacrifice. I talk about, what it means to lead. I talk about good leaders, bad leaders. I talk about all of those things. And I think what makes people listen to me is I'm real, and my experience is real. I don't make things up in terms of like, this is like a hypothetical situation. I talk from lived experience. And I think that has been the reason why people listen. And I don't always get it right. And I am a lifelong learner. And I will continue to do so. Because in the end, that's only going to make me a better person. There is, I'm 43 years old, and even living to 80, like at this point, I've only lived half my life, and I still have another half to go. And if I stop learning now, um, I will basically suffocate all of the opportunities. Number one, that have been dropped in my lap over the course of the last like 2-3 months as I begin my transition out of the Army. I have had so many good things happen to me, and because I try to look at it this way: like, if you live in fear, if you live in uncertainty, and if you live in doubt, nothing good is going to come at you. But if you start thinking about and being grateful and having gratitude for all of the small things that happen, whether that's a butterfly passing me, during the day, that's my mom, or, if, a connection that comes, Andre, mine and your connection that just, came, out of a whim, or all of the people that I meet, they're like, hey, I see you on social media. I see you running, like you inspired me to like get out and walk and do these things, or the sponsorship with 7PI that I now, to get a platform to make people accountable, like all of these opportunities. It's because I'm living for now. I'm living in the present. I'm not trying to stay stuck in the past. The past is the past. And if you live in the present, it's okay to think about the future. The future hasn't happened yet. What you do now is going to make that happen. So I have to get out of trying to like plan so much of the things that I can't control and worry about what I can control.
Bobbie, thank you so much for that beautiful beast mindset story, man. And once again, let me say thank you for protecting my peace on this U.S. soil for over 23 years. You're definitely an inspiration to women all over the world that going into the military not only shapes the mind, but it also shapes the mind, body, and spirit. Thank you so much. Definitely going to have you come back. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure. Wait, before I go, how can the viewers reach out to you, Bobbie? You're starting a new venture. How can the viewers reach out to you?
So I have, I mean, obviously I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I do have my blog, on Substack. And they can just search my name. My accounts are open and free. Even my Substack subscription, it's not paid, it's free subscription, and you get to kind of read through my life's journeys and through experiences. And if anything, just send me a DM through social media, whether that be Facebook or Instagram. I am on Threads also. So as I get, transition out of the Army, and retire, April, I will, be going with my nutrition business, full speed ahead. And I'll have my, certified personal training certification, my integrative health certification, and yeah, that's how they can get a hold of me.
Sounds like a winner. Make sure you guys subscribe, like, click that button. All it takes is one click to make a difference in your life or change somebody else's. This has been another, and I do mean another, exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show.